What separates a good anime from a great anime? Why do some animes stick with us long after we've watched it? Welcome to the workshop.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Kris.
We're two friends from high school and now aspiring writers, and in this podcast, we discuss and deconstruct storytelling elements in some of our favorite animes. Today in the workshop, we will be looking at a classic shoujo anime based on a manga that ran from 2002 all the way through 2010, Ouran High School Host Club.
Oh god.
This is our second episode, and today we'll be talking about the 26 episode animated adaptation of Ouran that aired between April and September 2006. So even though it's a series that was released a while ago, we'll still warn you guys that we will be talking about spoilers from the entirety of the televised series. So if you haven't seen it yet and think you might be interested, please watch it before listening on. Why did you laugh?
So, Ouran High School Host Club, for those of you that don't know, follows an honor student named Fujioka Haruhi, who's a first-year student at Ouran High School, a prestigious academy in Tokyo for rich kids and Japan's elite. Haruhi is admitted to the school on scholarship and one day happens to stumble upon the host club and breaks an extremely expensive antique vase. So the boys of the club mistake Haruhi for a boy at first and find that she's actually quite skilled at entertaining their female guests. So in exchange for paying off the vase, Haruhi ends up getting roped into joining the club and being a host.
Yay!
And there we go. And that's where the adventure starts. So let's go into first impressions. Let's just get this over with. Okay,
Yes.
Let's just get this over with.
Oh boy. Do people know what host clubs are?
Let's just describe it
Sure.
real quick.
So to my understanding, a host club it's a business, and they are not to be complicated or confused with like anything
Yeah.
prostitutional, right?
So it's not sex work,
Mhm.
but basically you pay a fee to just be entertained by good-looking guys or women.
Yeah.
Like it's men or women. This show follows a male host club. It's part of like Japanese like nightlife.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's usually just like a drink, a meal, and then like you
Yeah.
guys like talking.
This isn't really something that exists as much in other
No.
cultures. Like in other cultures, you just pay for sex work, but like
Mhm.
this is a little bit different because it's sort of like you're paying for like a fake intimate experience, which is super weird.
You're paying for the attention and
Mm-hmm.
almost like a false sense of emotional connection,
Which
if that makes sense.
is even like that's kind of sad, but yeah, that's what you're paying for.
Yeah. So this is an anime that I have watched previously already.
Yeah.
But this is Kristen's first time seeing the
Oh my god.
series, watching
Yes.
it upon my
Yes.
recommendation.
But I thought it would be interesting to have a discussion about this kind of iconic show from someone who is very familiar with it to someone like me
Mhm.
who's like never experienced it ever.
And whose first experiences from like another decade, you know?
Yeah, like
This came out in the early 2000s, and
Yeah.
now you're seeing it for the first time in 2020, which is, arguably a very different time.
Yeah, and I'm watching it as like someone in my early 20s and not someone who's like a kid or like
Yes.
in a teenager or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is Chris's like raw first impression.
Oh my god, I hate the word raw. Oh my god, but yeah.
I used it twice.
She went raw. Oh my
Okay.
god. Okay.
Great.
Wow. Where to begin? Okay, I feel like I should start by saying though that the show was better than I thought it would be. And that's
Okay.
probably because I went in with low expectations, but honestly, like so the only other shoujo content that I was familiar with before going into Ouran was stuff like Itazura na Kiss and Boys Over Flowers. Like
Mhm.
I don't know if you know those two, but those are also really, really popular,
Mhm.
like late 90s, early thousands shoujo.
Yeah.
And both of those stories, like they're also iconic. I don't want to like hate on anyone for liking them, but they're kind of shallow in their storytelling, and that's kind of the perception that I had of shoujo, was that it just
Mm-hmm.
had underdeveloped characters. It was very romance focused. And so when I actually started watching this show, it didn't actually turn out to be as romance focused or as shallow as I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot more interesting character depth and a lot more interesting character writing than I anticipated. And I honestly, like, genuinely, there were moments in the show where I was clutching my heart a little bit. Like, I was kind of feeling it. And I
Mm-hmm.
also enjoyed it a lot more when I started watching it more as a sort of as a parody or as a commentary of its own genre and of
Yes.
otaku culture, of like yaoi boys love fan culture, because I think there are moments in the show where they have a lot of self-awareness about the tropes.
Mm-hmm.
But with all that said, I don't feel like it, even though it has that self awareness, I don't think it particularly subverts those tropes or has any interesting dissection of those tropes. And so I think it's still, there's still like the fetishization of like problematic and controversial
Yeah.
dynamics. And I think it's, at the end of the day, I don't think it's like super harmful, because I don't think that it particularly romanticizes it. I think it's more played for laughs, and it might be a taste thing at the end of the day, but I'm just like, I just particularly have an aversion to things like moe and incest. Like, I just have like a
Uh-huh.
visceral reaction to it it's harder for me to play off those things as laughs, because it's just like, it just makes me personally uncomfortable.
I completely agree. And I think that if I were in your position watching it from fresh eyes in 2020 now as like a 21-year-old, I
Yes.
would have the same stance. Um,
Hmm.
and we did have some discussion earlier before starting the pod.
Hmm.
Well, is it okay for a series like this to be talking about these things, just because it came out earlier, like it came out in the early
Right.
2000s? Is it a
Yeah.
product of its time? I really, really liked the comedic aspect. And I think that comedy is something that's so essential to romance, because I think that it's undeniable that a lot of young girls, especially the audience that Ouran Host Club targets,
Yeah.
have these fantasies and these ideals
Hmm.
and expectations,
Right, right,
right,
right.
about
Yeah.
what love is, especially if they haven't experienced it yet.
Hmm.
And so, but at the same time, I think that for that kind of audience, love can be a really, really scary thing. And
Hmm.
so, comedy is nice in that it kind of buffers that risk and that danger.
Hmm.
And, that's why I think comedy is so essential when portraying
Hmm.
love and romance, which is why, personally, I think the series did so well when it first came out in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And then also it's just like people had a different mindset about stuff back then, like a lot of things
Yeah.
were allowed to slide in the early 2000s. So
I will say that in anime, a lot of things can still slide, but
mhm.
yeah, to your point about comedy, I feel like that is 100% true. Like, I think at the end of the day, you did watch this as a kid, but you grew up as an adult and you didn't. It's not like you were like, incest, yeah, totally here for it. Like
Oh yeah.
moe, yeah, pedophilia, like we're here for it. You
Mhm.
you learn through other media, so I don't think this is a show that could get away with all of that in 2020. But
Uh-huh.
I do think that um, it's because there are so many other strong points about the show, it kind of balances out. And I think it stands out especially because if you look at its contemporaries, we had male leads that were like douchebags and you're supposed to like romanticize that, and I would argue that
Mhm.
that's a lot more harmful for young girls or for young people to watch and to see that as romance than to see, for example, really awesome kind characters like Haruhi and Tamaki, you know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
think that this show has a lot more than romantic love at its center, which is probably what resonated with people over the years.
Mhm. So we've divided the writing into four sections of story of the storyline.
Hmm.
So firstly, we'll be focusing on episode 1 to 5. I think it was interesting when they introduced Renge for the first time. So essentially, Renge is a character
Renge!
she's like described as being a complete otaku.
Yeah.
Her character introduction, at least, was interesting because it made me really see Renge's character as almost like a representative of the viewers, because like Renge, we like to point out all of the flaws of the boys upon first seeing them, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, like you guys are so stereotypical, so
Mhm,
cliche. The plot is so dumb and the cast is so one-dimensional.
mhm.
How do you expect us to fall in love with these characters and
Yeah.
with this storyline?
Mhm.
But, as we'll probably go on to talk more about, I think the whole show is centered around how you shouldn't judge things by their first appearance.
Yeah. And like you said, she is a stand-in for us. And I was reading stuff about, like about the show in general, about its reception,
Mm-hmm.
and it really is praised as being a parody or a commentary of like otaku culture. And Renge does come in as this otaku who is just like, oh my god, Kyoya, and then finds
Yeah.
out that he's literally nothing like he thought or she thought he would be, which I think is a
Mm-hmm.
pretty important message or commentary to make about sort of idolizing people that you don't know or
Right.
fictional characters. So,
Love
yeah.
that for us.
Love that for us. So yeah.
I did have one note to say about Haruhi, like, especially when we first meet her. I think that
Mhm,
upon her initial introduction,
mhm,
she's supposed to be a stand-in for us as well, in a way
mhm,
where she's supposed to be the normal character.
mhm,
She's
mhm.
supposed to be the quiet, humble one, and so
The
she's
commoner.
supposed to be the relatable one.
Yes, yeah.
So when they first discover that Haruhi is actually a girl instead of a
Yes.
guy,
At the end of episode 1.
um, but when she takes her glasses off and like puts on a dress,
Right.
that's when you realize she's a girl.
Right.
And
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
know, like, I just let out a really deep sigh
Right.
when she took off her glasses. They
Uh-huh.
looked at her and they were like, "Oh my
Oh
goodness,
my god,
you
she's
are a
so
beauty."
pretty. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just tired of female protagonists who are supposed to be quote unquote relatable ending up being like the epitome of superficial beauty after, you just put some hair and makeup on her clothes, take her
100%.
glasses
Oh
off.
my god. That is a trope of the early thousands that has to die because I'm so
Yes.
tired of it. I'm really glad that you brought that up because now that's reminding me about just like how are there all these people that are just like, "Oh my god, Haruhi," like they're all just like falling for her and it's like she's
So
supposed to be.
fast.
I know, and I'm like, I hate this trope. This trope needs to die.
Hmm.
But I will say that Haruhi, I think that she is actually genuinely likable, and there's actually elements that we can see that she is kind, that she is caring, that she's humble, and that she doesn't take anyone's crap.
Yeah.
So she stays unbothered, and I love that for her. And to make this confession, which I already made to Emily, I watched a significant portion of the show in the English dub because,
Yeah.
it's a lot of hours to get through. And
Yeah.
Haruhi's voice actor in English highlights a more like deadpan personality.
Yeah. Her voice in reality is actually much higher, but she
Mhm.
forcibly lowered it during the anime
Oh,
so
okay.
to make that
Interesting.
effect to
Yeah. So
Haruhi.
I actually really like Haruhi's VA in English because it kind of adds sort of that chill, deadpan, like I don't take no crap from anyone type
Yeah.
side of her personality, which I really liked.
Yeah, because you come to understand that she's
Mhm.
just been through so much already
Mhm,
that
yeah.
at this point in her character, in her life, like,
Mhm.
no matter how ridiculous or wild or chaotic things seem to get for her, like,
Exactly.
she's already experienced the turmoils of life. Like,
Oh,
she's already had
100%,
her midlife
yeah.
crisis.
Um, so Tamaki, I feel like Tamaki, he's kinda established as the leader.
Right.
And then he also, like, kind of sees everyone in the club as his family or that he's some kind of dad,
Mhm.
and then that's kind of it, and then that's kind of all we see from him until the end of the show.
Right.
I liked Tamaki, but I was constantly craving more from his character. I was kind of wishing that the show had sprinkled more character building throughout the
Mhm.
26 episodes instead of getting it right at the end. Because I watched a significant portion of the show being like, why is Tamaki so chaotic and like and for what, you know?
Mhm.
So that was
Mhm.
my only gripe about Tamaki. But as a male lead, he's awesome. Like I actually really like his
Mhm.
character.
Yeah. I think that that was probably very intentional because
Oh,
um
100%, yeah.
as a viewer, like even I remember when watching this as a young girl, like I
Mhm,
still felt like I liked him as a character all throughout the series.
mhm,
And I think that his character, especially in the time period when it first came out, there weren't many characters that were chaotic, loud, boisterous,
mhm.
but still calm in a way. Like I don't know, you just derive a sense of delight from seeing him like do all
Yeah,
his antics and shenanigans.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, and while still maintaining that sense of mystery about him, it was
Mhm,
so paradoxical that
mhm.
I think that what was about him that kept viewers hooked onto his character, and it was okay for them to show all of his backstory at the very end. I don't know. I think that there was intention behind that to
Oh,
keep
yeah.
you wondering more about who this guy was and not giving it to you until the very end.
I mean, I'm not criticizing the choice to leave it to the end because there is a sense of maturity to Tamaki's character that you get even before
Yeah.
the end of the show. I think there are ways to sprinkle out character depth that isn't necessarily like here's some backstory. Like for example,
Mhm.
you meet Tamaki and then you learn more about him just by seeing how he wants to like help all these people, and that's a
Mhm.
character cue, but there's
Yep.
nothing specific about his backstory there. And I
Right.
just wish that there were more smaller character moments sprinkled throughout the show.
Mhm.
But I do agree that the payoff that we get at the end by learning all of his backstory is really reinforced by how much we have seen
Right.
of people's other people's opinions of him throughout the show.
Mhm. So the next section we'll be talking about spans from episode 8 through 13. We grouped the episodes accordingly because we thought that this was really the chunk of the series that focused on Haruhi's character development as well as the development between her relationship with the boys.
Yeah.
And episode 8 is what kicks off this section. It's the beach episode where essentially they all go visit the ocean.
Mhm.
And, you know, something happens with Haruhi. She witnesses a few of the girls who were also on this vacation getaway
Yeah.
being harassed by some rando strangers who were
Just
guys in
thugs.
the area. Yep, some thugs. And, you know, she tries to step in. In the meantime, she gets herself hurt. She gets herself pushed off of a ledge into the ocean, and she has to be rescued. After she is rescued, basically, she gets into a little bit of a disagreement and argument with the boys, especially with Tamaki, because there's this there's a conflict over whether it's really her place to step in a situation like that, especially because I mean the reality of the fact is that she's a woman, right?
Yeah, I really liked this episode. I think it was a moment where I kind of realized, yeah, I was like, this is actually a lot more character depth than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Was the show was capable with. But I started out like kind of feeling weird about this episode because I was kind of like the gender norms are really jumping out in this episode with just Tamaki being so mad at her. Because I but then I also understood both characters' perceptions because with Haruhi, it was like, was I supposed to do nothing? Like, there's these
Mm-hmm.
girls getting, harassed, and I'm here, and am I supposed to do nothing? But then I also understand where Tamaki is coming from, where it's like, you could have gotten hurt, and you can't just be so reckless, and you have to like be a little bit more self-aware and care about yourself a little bit more. So I understood where both characters were coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of annoyed that like Tamaki was basically just like, "But you're a girl," and like that's
Right.
why I'm mad.
Right.
But I think the episode is redeemed because we do get some depth to Haruhi's character. Um, Basically at the end there's a thunderstorm and she is scared of thunder and she kind of locks herself in this closet and Tamaki finds
Mm-hmm.
her, and we kind of learn that the reason that Haruhi is always so like quick to jump in and to not ask for help is because she grew up as a very independent person and she kind of had to learn how to rely on just herself, and that has now translated into who she is now. And I think that one, we get to learn that about her, which is great. And then
Mm-hmm.
two, Tamaki apologizes and he realizes where she was coming from, and so they kind of reconcile in that way, which is a lot more of an interesting and deep reconciliation than I
Right.
thought would happen. So
Right.
I do think that the moment of there's that moment where Kyoya pretends to sort of like come on to Haruhi and like pretends to basically ask for a sexual favor, like just to
Mhm.
quote unquote prove Tamaki's point that Haruhi is reckless because she walked into a man's room at night. I was like, that's such a stretch, and I'm not here for that. But
Yes.
the rest of the episode, I really liked.
I think, yeah, I really like this episode as well. I think that this episode tries to cover two separate questions, actually.
Hmm.
With the first question being that disagreement over, well, what are the boundaries, quote unquote, you have to
Hmm.
stay within as a woman?
Hmm.
Um, but then they kind of use that question as like a distractor from the core issue, which was Haruhi's sense of like independence.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the episode, I realized that they never actually come to a solid conclusion or an
Hmm.
answer for the first question. And I
Yeah.
think that was very
Yeah.
appropriate because,
Hmm.
it's a difficult question. Like, I don't think it's a secret that women
Hmm.
are considered physically, most of the time, weaker than men.
Yeah.
So the question that was first proposed, as like the initial conflict, was, should women be getting themselves into situations that might be potentially dangerous, even if it's the right thing to do in that situation?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That kind of got me thinking, like, as a woman, you're always trying to like empower one another because you have to.
Yeah.
Like, there
Yeah.
are always workshops all about, we must learn as women how to stand up for ourselves,
Yes.
how to navigate
Yeah.
today's society as a
Yeah.
woman. But, it's the unfortunate reality that there are no workshops for men about how to navigate society as a proper man,
Yeah. Yeah. I
respecting
agree.
other
Yeah.
people. And so it's unfortunate that we have to ask that question, like,
Uh-huh.
should women be getting themselves into a potentially dangerous situation?
For
Um,
that point, like I think the answer to that question is will always be the men shouldn't be creating those
yes.
situations in the first place. Like we can talk about like, okay, but if you were in that situation, like we can break
Mm-hmm.
down all the nuances and I think it's a case by
Exactly.
case thing, but the answer will always come back to it shouldn't be a situation ever. Um
Mm-hmm. It's like an unfortunate reality. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
we have to ask that question. We're forced to, but
Yeah.
we wish we wouldn't. We
Yeah.
didn't have to,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But then going on to the second question about, independence, especially in Haruhi's case, I think that for myself, episode
Mhm.
8 was like a pivotal point in the anime for me
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I saw myself in Haruhi in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
When she was talking about how she's unable to, like, she has this inability to ask for help from people around her,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that's why she gets herself into difficult situations.
Mhm.
I agree with the anime and seeing it as a weakness, because I think that it's easy to look at yourself as self-righteous and humble if you convince yourself that you have to shoulder everything alone. I
Mhm.
think that's like a very false sense of humility and a false sense of self-righteousness.
Mhm.
um, and as a result, like, you miss out on a lot in life and you find it difficult to trust others.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, I think episode 8 as a young girl resonated with me a lot, because
Mhm.
it was like, oh, it was the first time that, I saw it through media, depicted in media, a real commentary about how to trust people, how to depend on others. And the fact
Yeah.
that it was like in this like
Yeah.
shoujo anime, it was like,
Yeah.
it came as a real shocker.
Yeah, and I think also when you're a girl and you're, stubborn, I mean, like I personally like I grew up with an older brother, and so
Mhm.
I think we kind of had that similarity where I always felt like I had to like there's always something you had to prove because
Right.
you're a girl and you have to prove that you can do it by yourself like more
Exactly.
than yeah. So I guess I never took away that particular thought while I was watching this episode, but it's
hmm
interesting to hear that that's kind of how you perceived it as a kid watching it.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like watching it as an adult, like, these are kind of lessons that you have to learn already
Yeah.
as you're coming of age. But,
Mhm.
when you're a young teen or a young girl,
Mhm.
these are, things that you maybe didn't really realize or notice
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And then also just like as adults, because as adults we feel like we can just be so critical and like
Yeah.
oh, like we think we know best about what
Yeah.
kids are exposed to, right? But
I know. I mean,
it's interesting.
we're talking about like we're so old.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that we're adults, but we're in
Mhm.
our we're 21, guys. Like we're not that old. Like not to expose us or anything, but I would say that we have lived a significant portion of life. Like we lived
Mhm.
through those awkward teen years.
Yeah.
I would say those are very formative years of our
Mhm.
lives, and we have come out the
Mhm.
other side. So I think it's okay to have those opinions, but I agree. I think that adults tend to look at things with a lot of cynicism. And I
Right.
think that's, thinking critically is part of that. It's part of being cynical, but also I don't think it's okay to have cynicism or being critical as the default
Yeah.
mindset. I think cynicism should always be to challenge and to open up the discussion rather than to be
Definitely.
like the default, like this is just how I view society. Like,
Good episode. Let's go on to episode 9. So
yeah.
episode 9 kind of has its own small discussion points as well, because it's
Hmm.
the introduction of the Lobelia's Girls Academy.
Hmm.
I don't know, like I would say like we're feminists,
Yeah.
and being also women as ourselves, like we have a lot to say when it comes to portrayals of women, like,
Yeah.
and so that I think
Yeah.
that's why episode 9 kind of gets its own discussion point, because it shows a side of women that isn't like all of a sudden, that
Hmm.
is just a complete contrast to the women that we've been seeing portrayed so
Yeah.
far
Yeah.
at Ouran Academy.
Hmm.
So essentially what happens is that there are 3 representatives from the Zuka Club at the Lobelia's Girls Academy. Basically, they come making all of these vague, all-encompassing proclamations about manhood, womanhood, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Renge has this apt description of the Zuka Club as a group of strong young maidens who consider women to be superior
Oh
in every
God,
way.
the way that I
It's
cringed when she said that.
it's a society of maidens
Oh my
by
God.
maidens for maidens.
Absolutely not. I started out really liking this episode because, like you said, this is a completely different shift from how we are usually seeing females in the show. And so we see Lobelia, and you're like, oh my God, like, wow, they come in, they challenge, they rip Tamaki apart and the
Yeah.
gender norms. And they're like, do you think we need protecting? Like, you think that's what girls want to hear? And like all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was here for it. And I
Yeah.
also liked that, what's her name? Benio, whatever her name is.
Benny Barra, yeah.
Benny Barra, the sort of the leader of this club, she's
Mm-hmm.
sort of vying for Haruhi's affections.
Yeah.
And so it was like she's a female, she's being presented as a quote unquote love interest or whatever. I was like, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
fun. And it was silly and I was okay with that. But then just they had to come in and make them radical feminists. And I was like,
Yeah.
why? And then, oh my God,
What a good opportunity
it
to
was
waste.
they just squandered. They just squandered. I was literally about to let this show pass the Bechdel test, and then they had to come
Yeah.
in and use Hitler imagery for them. Like, I'm not even
Yeah.
making that up. Like
They did.
they came in with the
They
swastikas, and I was
did.
like, I hate
Yeah.
this so much. So that just sucks.
I think that there's also something to be said about like Lobelia's portrayal of what a strong, independent
Oh
woman
my
should
God, I
be.
hate it.
Why is it that a strong, independent woman, why do they have to be so masculine all the time? Why do they
Yeah.
have to have
Oh
short hair
God, I
and low
hate it.
voices?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And like I'm of the opinion that I think a woman can still be in a traditional relationship with traditional gender roles and still be happy and strong and independent,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
strength and independence doesn't come from this masculine idea of femininity. And
exactly.
so
Yeah.
that's kind of also what got me as to like, oh, why? But I
Mhm.
also I also acknowledge that that's a very new way of thinking, like in
I think it
the
does need to be said. Like, I think, again, it's a product of its time, and people are going to say, like, you can't judge it for all of these things because no one was thinking like that in the early thousands.
That's true.
But I think we're talking about it now in 2020. And
Yeah,
it has to be said that
it has to be said.
it does have to be said that again it was squandered potential. You came in,
Hmm.
you had basically canon lesbians coming to the show, and they had to be radical feminists, they had to be
Yeah.
butch, they had to have short hair. It was
Uh-huh.
so unfortunate because yeah, it just completely squandered any
Hmm.
good feelings I had about the characters, unfortunately.
And, you know, like at the end of the episode, I do believe that the end of the episode redeems the episode a little bit. It does. I don't think it fully does.
Episode
But
9.
just a little bit of episode 9 because, you know, Haruhi at the end chooses not to go with the Zuka Club, even
Right.
though
Yeah.
I think that it would be the most logical place for her to end up.
Yes. Yeah.
But, you know, she still chooses to stay with the host club. And
Yeah.
so I think that maybe what the mangaka was trying to say there is like, you can see Ouran as a commentary on gender roles, or you can see it as also like a story about characters that you just grow to love because you love their personality. And that's what Haruhi loved about the host club. She loved their personality.
Yeah.
And the Zuka Club, like, arguably has no personality other than their identity as extreme feminists.
Yeah,
like,
which is so unfortunate and so toxic.
I wish that we could know more about these characters other than their political stance on feminism, but
yeah, missed opportunities. Yeah, hate to see it.
Okay. So other things that happen within these like few episodes are the boys go to visit Haruhi at her home and they meet her father, and then you know, a couple of episodes later, basically there's this episode about like Haruhi in Wonderland. It's kind of a filler episode because they portray everything as like just another adaptation of the Alice in Wonderland story.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a surrealist episode, like a dream sequence almost, which was fun.
I mean, it was fun, and there wasn't much to take away from it that pertained to the main storyline, but I really liked that, you know, this was kind of the episode where it finally clicked to me that Haruhi wanted to become a lawyer like her mother. And, you know, there's this really meaningful scene towards the end of that episode where she's talking to the King and Queen of Hearts and she's acting as like legal counsel for Renge, who is under trial. I won't get into why. It's a
Let's
long
not
story.
get into why.
But she's acting as legal counsel,
yeah,
and she's kind of making a case for, is it okay for parents to take time away from their family and for their home because of their career, especially as a mother, because, you know, there's the traditional motherly role of being there for your children, especially for her. Like, her mother passed away when she was so young, and you can just only infer that her mother, because she was a lawyer when she was alive, didn't spend that much time at home either. And yet Haruhi still has such a deep and meaningful connection with her, and she brings up the question of like, if that's okay. And Haruhi kind of makes a statement, well, when a mother has to be away providing for her family, her children know that she's doing it out of love. And so sure, they might get lonely from time to time, but it's understandable. And so it's impossible to pass that kind of judgment on whether to say, oh, you're not being a good family woman because you are busy, you know, you're career oriented, you're busy at your job. So I don't know, like, this is an example of the kind of moments that make this series stand out to me as something more than just a typical shoujo manga and anime, because I think that, yes, you know, we were saying it executes the tropes of romance and taboo themes that have to do with romance poorly. It executes feminism poorly. But I think that it, you know, sometimes it portrays other themes very well, like the example of family and how to deal with difficult questions like a woman's place in society, especially when they want to be advocates for justice, right?
And I think there's also something interesting there about like just women's expectations about they are seen as people that are usually like, they're supposed to be the family oriented ones, and just moms and dads are held to such different standards. Like, dads can do the bare minimum, like change a diaper, and they're like, oh my god, like, he's such a good dad.
My goodness,
like, it's like, okay, great, you literally changed a diaper, like, good for you, like, you did the bare minimum, and for what? Like,
for sure.
So I think I did like how at the end it does tie back into like a deeper part of Haruhi's psyche, because it's really played off as this like dream sequence type episode, but you do get more about her personal goals, about her mom. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to unpack at the end of that episode.
All right, so the next section the next few episodes that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at episodes 14 through 20. So we grouped these episodes together because we felt like it was a good chance to get to know the host club members better.
Yeah.
So episode 15, essentially it's the beginning of summer, and Haruhi goes to Karuizawa, which is like kind of like in the countryside, I believe. It's
A
more
little bit.
of a rural setting.
Mhm.
She's basically staying and working at this B&B that belongs to a friend of her father's.
Mhm.
Because we have to keep the boys and Haruhi together.
Yeah.
We love plot armor. The boys end up there as well, and they kind of have this like little fun competition to see who can score the most points with like the owner of the B&B and stay with Haruhi at the B&B during the summer.
This is definitely a moment with the twins.
For sure.
I did like the I did like the introduction of Arai. He's like this fellow commoner who was
Love that.
friends with Haruhi in middle school, and we also learn had a crush on her. Who would have guessed?
Oh my
And
gosh. No way.
yeah, no way. And so, he's happy to see Haruhi. They're catching up, and there's this whole thing about Hikaru, one of the twins, getting just like super antagonistic towards this guy. And so we
Yeah.
kind of have a moment to delve into Hikaru's character and why he's acting like this. And, Hikaru's kind of, I guess his emotion, what should I say? His emotional
His
intelligence.
control over his emotions.
Yes, his
yeah,
EQ.
I would say his emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's it's got a little bit of work. So I liked that. I liked that we got to differentiate the two characters because, identical twins, even though they're identical, they have individual personalities. Who would have guessed?
What?
What I did feel, I don't know. How do you I'm going to ask you first. How did you
Sure.
feel about this kind of justification for Hikaru's anger?
Right.
And
I
guess,
don't think it's justified. I definitely agree with you that it was like a very rude way of portraying your jealousy and like unnecessary. It's extra, but I understand that it's not unfounded, right? Because we learn that the twins go through a special kind of childhood. We really very much see them grow up in such like their own little bubble, and I think that obviously there are consequences from growing up in a bubble, and so is it unfounded? No, because I think that there are reasons that have led up to his lack of EQ.
Yeah.
But is it justified? No, because obviously you should never, you should never treat another human being in that way.
Yeah.
And, especially because like her childhood friend, like he wasn't even trying to come on to her or anything.
Yeah, he
like
was just
he was
literally
definitely
trying to hang out, catch up.
But at the same time, from a viewer point of view, looking at a narrative, it was a good way of differentiating between Kaoru and Hikaru.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, I like the idea of having one of them be superior to the other in some way, instead of just saying, oh, Kaoru likes this. He has different hobbies. He's different. But I like that instead of differentiating laterally, they differentiated it hierarchically.
I would hesitate to use like superior or in that kind of way, only because
that's true.
I guess you could say like, yeah, Kaoru does have better emotional awareness and better self-awareness, but I do agree with your point on that is a much more interesting differentiation than just like he's into soccer and he's into cooking. Yeah, it would be it's like the differentiation is a lot more, there's a lot more depth there. It's not as shallow as it could have been. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I enjoyed that aspect of the plot. And so, I'm not gonna hate Hikaru just because he did that. Like obviously if it was a real person in real life, that would not fly. That doesn't fly.
Absolutely not.
For the purposes of advancing the narrative and distinguishing himself from the other twin, okay.
But I will say that I think the execution could have still been a little bit better. I think it's okay if Hikaru is, he's presented as like jealous and like he doesn't like this guy. But I just felt like it was so overt and it just like it was so heavy-handed, I guess.
And we always say like good writing is showing, not telling.
Exactly. And that's what it comes down to with these two episodes. It was a lot of telling.
Yeah.
instead of showing,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And, on a side note, basically there's this moment where Hikaru, like, I don't know, throws a bit of a temper tantrum and,
Yeah.
he runs away from Haruhi and, like, leaves her alone during a thunderstorm, which, as we know, she's scared of thunder. And then
Mhm.
Hikaru rushes out and finds her again. And then they share this little moment where
Mhm.
I found this so cute. Like, it actually went like aw out loud when
Yeah.
he like puts the
Put his
headphones on her
headphones.
to block out the thunder. I literally wrote,
Uh-huh.
"I love this." Yeah,
Aw.
it was really cute. And I think it's literally just like a small character moment. There's like no words really exchanged, and I think
Mhm.
that's where the strongest moments of the show are, like in the little moments.
Mhm. And it kind of throws in some, like, love interest intrigue into it
It does. Yeah.
because right off the bat, you know that Haruhi's gonna end up with Tamaki, and,
Yeah.
like, I get that with, like, reverse harem. It's like
Yeah.
the love interest is technically supposed to be with all the boys.
Yeah.
And so I think that Oran does a good job in making it clear that, like, we're not gonna do that. Like,
Yeah, I
we're
was gonna
not gonna
say
make everybody interested in her. Like, even later on in the series, like,
Uh-huh.
Honey and Mori are, like, talking and they're
Yeah.
saying, like, oh, like, do you think Kyoya is interested in her? Or
Yeah.
like Kaoru? And they're like, nah, I
Yeah, yeah,
honestly
yeah.
think it's just Hikaru and Tamaki. So realistically, like, at the end of the day, there are only two guys within this host club that,
Yeah.
like, actually has a
Like, have, like,
romantic
feelings for her in that
feelings
way,
for
yeah.
her.
I'm
Yeah.
just and this is completely personal, I don't really like love triangles
Mhm.
or any kind of love squares or whatever where it's
Or
like
any shapes. I
yeah.
hate geometry. Just no, not here.
Where it's obvious who the person's gonna end up with in the end.
Mhm.
I do think, like, it can be done well. I think that this show kind of does it well because it's not just about the love triangle, like, the
Mhm.
main focus is that we are learning things about Hikaru.
Even for the vying of Haruhi's heart with, like, Hikaru, like, that's not
Mm,
really it. Like,
mhm.
they mostly use Haruhi's presence in his life as a way for him to become more connected with his emotions. Like,
Exactly,
he
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
really know how to care about others, so it's
Mhm.
not like he has feelings for Haruhi. Haruhi is
Yeah,
just somebody in his life who he cares deeply about, and so
exactly.
he's almost like, it's almost like having her as a guinea pig on how do I interact with other people?
Right.
How do I care for people that I genuinely like?
Mhm.
And so it wasn't completely about, oh, I have feelings for her, but I think she has
Yeah.
feelings for Tamaki,
Yeah, yeah,
so I don't
yeah.
know, you know.
Yeah.
I would actually die for Hikaru. Let's just say.
Oh my god.
I actually really like Hikaru.
Alright, alright.
Anyways. Also, sorry, I just realized that I missed
Mhm.
the Honey's episode. Because I
Oh,
didn't
yeah, I
have
thought
that
you
much
just
to say
skipped
about
it.
this
I thought
one.
you just skipped it,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Okay."
Did you
I
have
was
any
gonna
notes about it though?
nothing, like, substantial. I do like
Hmm.
I mean, we can talk about Honey's character for a little bit.
Okay, quickly.
Yeah.
Honey and Mori. We'll group
Let's
them
talk about
together
Honey and
because
Mori because 'cause they're in the
they're
club.
not really fleshed out anyway.
Yeah. I feel like Honey and Mori are just there for seasoning, just for a little bit of
Right.
flavor, which is totally fine. Like, not every character has
Hmm.
to have, a
Yep.
whole elaborate backstory. Honey is basically he's the moe character. Like, he's supposed
Mm.
to be 17 years old, but he acts like he's 5. Um,
And he looks like he's
and
5.
he
Oh
looks like
my
he's
gosh,
5,
why?
and he talks like he's 5. It's very
Like,
problematic. It's so
I'm
problematic.
and they have, it's not even just Honey, like, they have so many children, young children come into the club, and
I know.
I understand where the low Okay, listen. I understand where the Lolita trend and trope comes from, and I understand the inclusion of it.
Mm,
So, fine, Honey gets a place and a role in this club,
yeah.
but why are there so many other episodes where other children are also coming into this club? It's a high school! Why
Leave,
are children
leave.
being allowed into the high school?
She's getting
Ugh,
heated.
I'm really upset.
People can debate about how harmful the moe trope is, specifically in this show. I just
Mhm.
have a lot of very visceral feelings about
Yeah.
pedophilia
Yeah.
and about
Yes.
just the sexualization of minors in general, and I will not
Mhm.
excuse it just because it's an anime.
Yeah, I
And
definitely agree with you there.
I do like that I guess the twist with Honey's character is that he's actually this like really skilled fighter.
Martial arts
He's
expert.
actually like deadly good at martial arts,
Yeah.
but that doesn't excuse the moe.
Just because I
Yeah.
like this aspect of your character doesn't
Yeah.
excuse the existence of your character.
Exactly. I do think Honey is cute. I do think that he
Yes.
has these moments where he's a lot more like perceptive, but I just wish there was no moe. But you know what?
I just
It's
wish
fine.
there was no pedophilia.
Yeah.
I just wish.
I just
Is
wish.
that so
Is
hard?
that so hard to ask?
The other thing is like
Yeah.
that I thought was funny was earlier on they like when they introduced him as a fighter, they're
Mhm.
like, "Oh yeah, Honey is like the national champion at
Mhm.
karate and judo, I
Yeah,
think."
something like that.
And I just thought it was so funny coming out of the Haikyuu episode where it was like it took the boys 4 seasons to be recognized at
Yeah.
the international level, sorry, at the national level.
Yeah.
And, you know, Oran is just flippantly like, "Oh yeah, Honey's
Yeah.
like the national champion." No big deal.
I mean, Ouran gets a pass for being absolutely ridiculous, but I don't think anything gets a pass for
Yeah.
pedophilia. Sorry.
So for the next section, we're calling it the finale arc. So basically this arc covers episodes 21 through 26. It's kind of like the culmination of everything that we've watched so far. We
Mhm.
get all of this foreshadowing and the stakes start to get higher and higher. Of course, they don't really tumbleweed into like gradually. It's kind of like the stakes all of a sudden get high
Mhm.
towards like episode 25, 26. But we do
Yeah.
get a little bit of foreshadowing starting from episode 21,
Yeah.
which is the Halloween episode. And, you know, that's kind of where Kaoru starts with this like allegory, if that's the right word, or like analogy of
Mhm.
the Cinderella magic spell, which I thought was really meaningful because I definitely agree that the host club, the more you get to know them and see their interactions and the things they do, you can actually kind of describe them as living in a dream, right?
Yeah.
But their riches and their good looks kind of make them ignorant towards the issues of the real world.
Mhm.
And they live in a loneliness and a helplessness that they kind of want to cover up
Yeah.
with all their frivolity.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's easy to see how if anything were to ever happen to the host club, it's kind of like a shattering of this thin glass that they're dancing
Mhm.
over.
Yeah.
And so Kaoru, he's aware of the lie in which they're living, and he is aware that something like this can't really last forever.
Yeah. And I do think that, just to go back to like what I said about the self-awareness of the show,
Mhm.
um because you know you're watching it and it's so ridiculous, and so to finally we're reaching the end, and you know they're actually tackling that idea of this is sort of a fantasy, and what does
Yeah.
that mean for the characters and for their future. um
And almost like it's raising the
mhm.
stakes for for the viewers as well,
Yeah.
because you know from episodes 1 through 21, like we participated in this frivolity and we
Yeah.
enjoyed the comedy and the like lighthearted romance that they brought into our lives.
Mhm.
Okay, and then we get into episode 24, which is
Mhm.
the episode where we really take a deep dive into Kyoya's character. Um I thought that their execution of Kyoya's character was cool. It was really cool because
Mhm. I agree.
I like the premise of striving to be the perfect third son, which you
Mhm.
don't really see, right?
Yeah.
You see characters striving to be the perfect first son.
Mhm.
Um, but in Kyoya's case, it's different because, well, he says, "How can I demonstrate my abilities without exceeding the limits of my like my label as being
Yeah.
third son?" And he likens it to painting a perfect picture on a canvas that has already been placed inside a frame, which I
Mhm.
thought was like a cool
Imagery.
it was cool imagery, and it was a cool way of going about, okay, how do we tackle pressure, like family pressure,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I liked that we kind of returned to Kyoyo's character, because it's so easy to just be like, oh, duty and like inheritance
Uh-huh.
and blah blah blah. But they do some fun things with, I guess, with both Kyoya and Tamaki's character. And they're
Mhm.
both of them are part of these very prestigious families. And you kind of see
Yeah.
this, I guess, juxtaposition between Kyoya being so ready to follow his father and to like please his father, and then Tamaki, who is technically supposed to literally be inheriting his family's company, but he's
Mhm.
a much more carefree and energetic. And so it kind of is interesting to put these two characters together and to sort of see that dynamic, Kyoya's father asks Kyoya to like befriend Tamaki for
Yeah.
sort of like selfish reasons, you know, like get close to him, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah. And then
Keep
in
your
the
enemies
process,
closer than your
yeah,
friends.
exactly. And I literally, I wrote in my notes, I was just like, I love this trope of one person thinking they're playing their enemy and then the other person just wants to be friends, lol. I felt
Aw.
like it was like so precious and it speaks so much to both of their characters and adds a lot
Mhm.
more interesting depth to like the arc of their friendship and how they
Mhm.
actually do become really close friends.
Yeah, the placement of episode 24 right before the final two episodes as well kind of
Mhm.
hones in on just how big of a character Kyoya is. And like
Mhm.
you really I feel like
Yeah.
the writer and the mangaka really wants you to see Kyoya and Tamaki as a unit
Mhm.
because for Kyoya, Tamaki really entered Kyoya's life in a very unexpected way
Uh-huh.
and changed it for the better. And so
Yeah.
that's why Kyoya is part of the club because Kyoya is not someone who you would think wants to be in a club like that,
Yeah.
and you don't really see him entertaining girls, so he's not in it for what the club can give to him, but he's
Yeah.
more so in it for what Tamaki gives and brings into his life.
Mhm, mhm. Yes. The
So
finale.
I'm still actually okay. I'm still actually confused about like the premises of the finale, and the school fair. But I think it's
Oh
because
god.
like it's a cultural difference in that for high schools in Japan, I guess like the school fair means a lot to
It is,
them,
yeah. I think in general,
right?
club activities are just a big thing in
Mm-hmm.
like Japanese high schools. Like, I don't know if it's like required that you be in a club, but people take their extracurriculars like very seriously. So I think that's why
Mm-hmm.
the school fair is like a huge thing.
And you see it in like other animes as well. Like
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
upcoming school fair, like you have to prepare for it a lot and
Hmm.
it has to go well.
Hmm.
And so it's definitely like a cultural thing cuz
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like school culture is just so much more, I guess it's just very different over in Asia.
yeah.
When I was studying in Asia, I went to Japan for a
Mhm.
weekend. Like I was there on a weekend and there were kids
Yeah.
taking the train on like a Saturday in their school uniforms. And I was like, there's no way
Oh.
these kids are going to
Huh?
school on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just school is like so different over
Interesting.
there. I don't know.
But basically for the school fair, the host club like puts on this big event, and the main idea of the fair and the big event is like we are witness to certain interactions between parents, kids, the parents and the friends of the
Mhm.
kids, blah blah blah, because a
Mhm.
lot of this story is a lot of the plot is pushed by family relations because I guess in like the bourgeoisie of Japan, like it does have a lot to do with family
Mhm,
connections
mhm.
and the relationship between this family and the next
Yeah.
family. And so it was an opportunity for viewers to get a closer um, look into what the parents think about the host
Yeah.
club and how the parents compose themselves in public and interact with their kids in public as well,
Mhm.
right? We see interactions between Tamaki
Mhm.
and his father is warning him, like, you can't keep on dreaming
Yeah.
forever. There are consequences to all of your actions and all of your
Mhm.
whims, because it's no surprise that Tamaki is a whimsical guy and he's chasing after dreams
Yeah.
constantly, but he has to wake up to this cutthroat lifestyle that he's destined to live. Because if you're living in this sort of world where you're vying for the company after your father, there's kind of no room for frivolities like the host
Yeah.
club, right?
So this is where we're finally meeting Tamaki's family, because before this, we really don't know anything about Tamaki, and so now we are finally meeting his family and we are seeing that his family is kind of messed up and it's like all over the place. It's very
Mm-hmm.
fragmented. We learn in Kyoyo's episode that Tamaki is actually an illegitimate child. And so that
Mm-hmm.
adds just so much more complexity to like the politics of his whole family.
Yes.
And it also makes you realize that family is kind of the central theme of this show and that Tamaki
Mm-hmm.
has basically created a family with the host club because we finally see now that his actual family is so messed up and weird and
Mm-hmm.
fragmented, and now it's kind of him having to face like the fantasy that he's created. Not that the host club is a fantasy, but he did curate it himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus,
He built it up from the
yeah,
ground as soon as he got to Japan,
exactly.
which was kind of like the period of time when his real family life kind of like fell into the
Yeah,
shambles,
and so
right?
now he's having to face that, or we're seeing the clash of those two sides of his world, and
Yes.
it is really, I guess it is a really compelling part of the show. And we have this girl Eclair show up. First of all, like Eclair is this girl from France who Tamaki has to marry for, reasons. Um
Political
Her name is
reasons.
Eclair. That's racist. First of all. Like,
That's a
I'm
dessert. I was literally in my notes. It says, "I can't believe they named this French girl
I am
after a
literally
French
I
dessert."
wrote Lamau, this girl's name is literally Eclair. Shut up, that's racist. Um, it's just so ridiculous. But anyways, let's move on.
Yeah,
Um, I don't like female characters, especially female characters or any characters that come in purely to serve the purpose of being an antagonistic vessel for the
the
protags.
sexual
Yeah, for the protags
antagonist.
to
Love that.
realize their feelings. Like, it's a waste of potential on,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's fine if that's
Mm-hmm.
the purpose that she needs to serve, but like, why not introduce her sooner? Why not introduce her, like, even
Mm-hmm.
if she's not like, just to have her as more of a looming presence over the show instead of just like dropping her in the
Yes.
mid, like it, she feels like a cardboard cutout of a person. That was
Mm-hmm.
like my biggest issue with her and with a lot of the
And I
characters.
feel like they tried to justify a little bit at the very end when she was like, "Oh, I was gonna bring him to
His,
see
yeah.
his mother," and like he said thank you to me. He said thank you to me,
Yeah.
swoon. But like, it's not enough. It's just not enough of a justification. Like, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Like, what were the reasons for her to have wanted to bring him to see his mother?
Yeah.
What are you
Like,
getting out
what
of it? What are your morals and
exactly, like,
standards?
what is
Right? Blah
your
blah blah.
stake in this other than
And
yeah.
you know what was another opportunity wasted? They were literally in the car, and Tamaki turns to her and goes, "What about you? Like, what are you in it
Yeah.
for? Are you really going to be happy in this marriage with me?" And they cut to a different
Yeah.
scene instead of listening to her
Yeah.
answer.
Ugh, I hate it.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate. My other thing is, like, I'm not saying that the finale was bad. Like, I genuinely I enjoyed the finale. I had the
Mhm.
warm
Mhm.
fuzzies. My heart was beating, like, when they were, chasing Tamaki and making sure that he doesn't, go back to France, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. I will say, though, that that is exactly the finale that I envisioned for a show like this, because
Expected.
that's literally, isn't that how they all end? It's just one of them has to
Mhm.
leave and
Mhm.
then the other person chasing them down and
Mhm.
being like, "Don't leave. I like care about
Yeah.
you." Like, it's exactly what
Yeah.
I imagined. And so it just solidified my dislike for Lady Eclair coming in at the end just to like facilitate the whole thing. But I will say, though,
Mhm.
that this show like wrote the romance with a like the actual romance between Tamaki and Haruhi with
Mm.
a lot more restraint than I
Yeah.
imagined it would be. Like, I literally thought this would be a straight up romance, but it's really like the most of the show is about Haruhi's relationships with everyone in the club, and it's about her coming to
Mhm.
realize that she has fun with all of these people, and her feelings for
Mhm.
Tamaki, like, they just kind of come in as like this realization at the very end of the show. It's a lot more wholesome and sweet, and I almost want to say realistic, because it's
Mhm.
not as overt. Um, and so
Mhm.
yeah, it's crazy because in the midst of this ridiculous show, the romance is the one thing that actually has a little bit of like subtlety to
Mhm.
it, which is kind of nice.
And that brings me back to my question as well about like what makes Oran a classic and so
Mhm.
beloved. And I think it's because like I'm actually like a big sucker for happy endings
Mhm.
because I just want like the satisfaction and like the payoff. And so I was really glad it was a happy
Mhm.
ending. And just to go back to your point about being nuanced and like
Mhm.
subtle, I totally agree. Like she comes to the realization that she cares about Tamaki not because the entire series he's like vying for her
Yeah.
attention and
Mhm.
like being nice to her. Like it's not because he's always chasing after her, but it's because she realizes that he cares so deeply for others.
Mhm.
He wants to help others so
Mhm.
badly. He's a pure idiot and not
Yeah,
like he has no
he's
ulterior
such just like
motives.
a pure idiot. Like, he really does things out of the kindness of his heart. And I think that's so different from a lot of the male love interest protags that we see in a
Mhm.
lot of these types of shows. Like, they're not so wholesome and endearing.
And she recognizes that he does do something for her. He allows her to let loose, have
Mm-hmm.
fun. He introduces her into this family that like genuinely cares about her, and that, you know, yes, they have a lot of inequities and they're not perfect, and but they like recognize that, and you know, that's what being a family is about.
Yeah.
Not everybody in your family is going to be
Mm-hmm.
perfect. Like as a family, you're going to go through
Mm-hmm.
struggles, and so I think that to answer like why is Oran such a classic, it's because they present you at first with such a ridiculous idea and such a ridiculous
Mm-hmm.
plot, and then by the end of it you're like, oh my gosh, what, I would die for you
I mean,
guys.
I would say though, like from a writing perspective, I can see why it's, I guess, worthy of being a classic within the shoujo genre, but I'm curious to see like
Mm-hmm.
actually like culturally, because not everyone watches anime like this. Like not everyone is like, oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
like this is my favorite show because it subverts tropes and blah, blah, blah. Like,
Yeah.
so I'm curious as to actually like, was it the timing or was it really for these reasons that we're discussing? Like what was it
That's
that
true, that's
resonated
true.
with people so like widely? um
Because I know a lot of people who've
mhm,
seen it who don't watch anime, so it was very like
yeah.
historically altering, I would
Yeah,
say.
and I would say like, I mean, I have close friends who watched it, and you know, they're not, they don't watch shows with any kind of particular critical mindset or
Yeah.
anything like that, but they really love the
Mhm.
show and they
Mhm.
watched it as a kid and they're just like, "Oh yeah, like Ouran, like of course I watched that as a kid." Well, because I'm watching it as an adult, right? Like and I can
Mhm.
say like, yeah, it's good for these reasons. But I wouldn't be thinking that as a kid. So,
And maybe, you know, maybe it's something deeper, and maybe it's something that we'll never know either, but also maybe it's just because it's just a love story,
yeah,
Chris.
okay, you know
It's
what?
just a love story
Maybe
and we love love.
Maybe it's because the show is a love story, but it's actually, I would say, focused more on family love than it is romance love, like, which I was not
Yes.
expecting at all. Like, I was not expecting for romance
Mhm.
to take the back burner on the show. It sounds like
Mhm.
such a paradoxical thing to say because it's a show about a host club, but yeah.
Yeah. Just it's I love it. I love it
Yeah.
because I like grew up with
Mhm.
it and I have so many
'Cause
feelings.
nostalgia is such an interesting thing, like, it really is. 'Cause,
Mhm.
like, you
Mhm.
can look at it and be like, "I love this," like, despite everything,
Yeah.
and, like, my ultimate nostalgia anime on the completely other end of the
Mhm.
spectrum is Naruto, and Naruto has so
Yeah.
many, like, terrible, like, things about it in its writing, in its pacing,
Mhm.
in the way it dropped its ball, and its character writing, but you look at it and you're just like, "This was my childhood," like, I
Mhm.
can literally like watch a scene and like just cry remembering like everything or listen to a song and just cry remembering everything. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting
You're
to
gonna
kind of
you're gonna laugh at me for bringing
why.
this up, but I liken nostalgia to how a writer would portray
Mhm.
dreams, and literally one of the most prominent discussions that I've ever had about nostalgia and dreams comes from our AP English class. So, Chris, I don't know if you remember,
I'm
but it's
scared.
when we were studying the Glass
Oh my
Menagerie,
god, yeah.
and basically we had this entire discussion in class about how in dream-like situations and works, we see that like everything is distorted except for whatever we are dreaming about. Like the
Mhm.
main focus is always crystal
Mhm.
clear, and then everything else around that is just blurred out. Like when I recommended or on High School Host Club to you, the first thing that stuck out to my mind wasn't, oh my gosh, the incest, the the
Yeah,
pedophilia.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking
Mhm.
about it. I was thinking, oh my gosh, she's gonna love the finale.
Mhm.
Like I was remembering all of the good things that I took away from Oran,
Yeah.
because I think that's just how nostalgia
Yeah.
works. I think that there are there are positive aspects to things that we take so
Mhm.
personally and that means so much to us, and we take it away, and everything else that was negative or that didn't contribute much just was blurred away. And I think that's the essence of nostalgia, right?
Mhm.
Because you always think that you always look back on the memories that you've had and wish that you were there, but the memories that you're living through right now are just not as, they don't shine as brightly because the negative aspects are still there and they're
'Cause you're
still
still living it.
concrete.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Mhm.
exactly, whereas things in the past, it's like the negative stuff that didn't mean as much just kind of faded away for you. When in reality, the memories of both present and past are probably of equal value as well, you
Yeah, I
know?
mean, I agree. Like, I think nostalgia is so it's just so powerful, and I feel it a lot with anime in particular because, I when I think of my childhood, I think of anime. That's a lot of what I watched as a kid, and so the way that
Mhm.
I always view it is like it's it's like a memory, but all you are remembering are the feelings and not the details. And so the
Yeah.
feelings
Yes.
it's just everything else melts away. And so the thing that you're actually remembering, it's not anything specific. It's just what you
Mhm.
felt about the details, but not the
Yep.
details itself. Um,
And that's really, I think, what the finale of Ouran tried to do. Like, if you look at the setup of the finale and the sunset, the
yeah.
water.
But I think that this show does a good job of like making it feel like the ending is earned, and it is like
Mhm.
genuinely like heartwarming. And I was like very shocked at like how
Mhm.
much I was kind of feeling things. Like I was feeling emotions. Like I love a good romance just as much as anyone else. Yeah, it was good. It was powerful. Okay, so for our next segment, we will be doing the Bechdel test, which, if you don't know what the Bechdel test is, it's basically a test that was developed by a cartoonist, I believe, named Alison Bechdel. And it's basically 3 questions that you can ask yourself about any piece of media to judge the female representation
Oh
in
boy.
said media. And basically how good that female representation is.
Mhm.
So the 3 questions are: number one, are there at least 2 named female characters? Number
Mhm.
two, do they speak to each other? And number three, do they speak to each other about something other than a male love interest? I mean, there are at least 2 named female characters. There are a bunch
Yeah,
of
there
named
are a
female
lot.
characters.
Mhm.
Do they speak to each other is,
Yeah.
I would say that's up for debate.
No, okay, well, they speak to each other and okay. So, see, it's like hard to determine if they're speaking to each other or if they're speaking to the audience to just like get across a point that they're trying to make,
Sure.
right? Like Renge breaks the fourth wall a lot. He's
She
talking to
is.
all of the host club members,
Mhm.
but you never really see her and Haruhi have a moment.
Yeah.
The Lobelia girls talk to each other, but it's not really a conversation, you
No.
know? So it's like it's hard.
Yeah, I would say that there's no, like, clean answers, but I would say you could stretch, but you would be stretching so much
Yeah.
that to really look at it fairly, it's like it's too much of a stretch in my opinion. Like,
Mhm.
I do feel
Mhm.
like Haruhi is, like, the only real fleshed out female character in the
Yeah.
show, and that all the other female characters are there to serve a purpose for the
Mhm.
other host club
And
characters.
like I guess even at this point we can say that already that the series doesn't pass because even if we just look at the
No.
next question, do they speak to each other about something other than a male love interest? Like nothing
Hardly.
comes to mind.
No. Yeah.
So, and we had said like that's so disappointing because this cast is so full of females.
Yeah. Oh
There
my
are so
god.
many girls that come in and go, and yet
Uh-huh.
you still can't fulfill the bare minimum requirements of the Bechdel test.
Exactly, and I just the fact that there's so many females and, like, not one of those characters is, like, Haruhi's friend, like, there's no
Yeah.
female healthy, strong, interesting female friendships in the show is also such a waste,
Mhm.
and again, product of its time, it's the early thousands, there's the whole
Mhm.
trope of, like, I'm not like other girls because I'm not
Yeah.
friends with other girls," is we know now is, like, super toxic, but,
And just to your
yeah.
point, like I hate the idea of like
Uh,
I hate the idea that in order to be cool, collected,
yeah.
not like other girls, you have to hang out with boys.
Yeah, yeah. It's really the worst trope that came out of the early to mid thousands, like,
For real, like
really the
if
worst.
you don't have any guy friends, if you don't hang out with the guys and hang or down with the boys, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, you're just like any other girl and you're not
Or
special.
if you're into dresses and, like, quote, unquote, "feminine things," like, you're just like other
Mhm.
girls, you're not cool, ugh.
I saw this tweet the other day that was like, and I retweeted it and you liked it, so you know what I'm talking about. I saw this
Okay.
tweet where it was like, I'm convinced that like any girl who
really likes pink nowadays, like now that they're older, was like denied from liking pink as a child because
Oh
like they
yeah.
thought it was too girly or
Mhm.
like they were looked down on for it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I resonated so much because I
Yeah.
actually took ballet when I was a kid,
Me too.
and
Oh my gosh.
oh really?
Yeah, I did.
We never knew this about each other. Um, and like I took ballet and like I purposefully made my parents stop the lessons because I
Mm.
was scared of being seen as too girly, and I was a real tomboy as a kid.
Mm.
And now like I regret that so much, and now I love the color pink. And
Yeah.
like I can attest to that mindset being so heavy on my mind even as a child
Yeah.
that I couldn't wear pink. I shouldn't do ballet. It's too girly. I didn't want to be like other girls, you know?
Yeah, and it's so interesting because it's like it wasn't something that was necessarily imposed on us by
Mhm.
anyone or by my parents or anything like that, but it's something that we internalized for some
Yeah,
reason,
it
and
was
so many
self-imposed.
girls have internalized it. Like, when I moved into, like, the house, like, my family house now, I moved into it when I was maybe 5 years old or something,
Mhm.
and 5 or 6, and I came in the room that was supposed to be mine. It was originally painted pink. And I
Mhm.
immediately walked in, and, like, the first thing I told my mom was like,
Oh my
"We're
gosh.
painting this room, mom." And so,
Yeah,
yeah, like, I painted my room because it was pink, and I had this, like, aversion to pink, and,
right.
like, I totally had to unlearn a lot of these things. Um, and I think for me, it also just came as a product of growing up with an older brother, growing up watching
Right.
shonen anime because of my brother, growing up playing video games because of my brother. I just thought that, like, that's how you're supposed to be cool because, like,
Mhm.
I see my older brother doing this, and like, if I'm just like a girly girl, then it falls into like all these expectations of who I'm supposed to be. And
Mhm.
that's the kind of, it's not any conscious thought that I had when I was a kid, but it
Yeah.
was something that I, for some reason, internalized. This is not to say, like, just because a show doesn't pass the Bechdel test, like, you should hate it, da da da, like,
Yeah.
cancel it.
Yeah.
No, but I think you should be aware that it's not the type of tropes that we should bring into modern media.
Mm. And
Yeah.
just to show that like how easy it is to get those opportunities and waste them as well. Like don't
Oh,
waste the
yeah.
opportunities that you're
Mhm.
given,
Mhm.
especially like when you have a platform and an audience, like take
Mhm.
advantage of that to do good for the psyches of like your audience, especially if it's going to be like little girls, because I think that's such an audience that has been brushed under the rug and like,
Mhm.
oh, we'll cater to the little girls with like good looking boys and shallow
Yeah.
romance stories because that's what they
And
like.
it's like, who's to say that, like, this is what little girls wanna see, Like, that's such a leap
Yeah,
to just be
that's
like,
true.
"Look at all these pretty boys." Like, that's what girls wanna see, right? Like, right?
Mhm. It's so presumptuous.
Yeah. But that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
So
We've, like, touched a lot of issues today.
there's yeah, this discussion got very,
Ah.
broad very quickly. So, unfortunately, Ouran High School Host Club does not pass the Bechdel test.
Eh.
Bye, sorry.
I still like it, though.
Yeah. And to pause that feminism for a second, let's transition to dumpster fire.
I hate every single transition into dumpster fire.
So dumpster fire.
Basically, it's a time when no brain cells are required. We are just going to fangirl over what we really, really like. And it's just gonna be like some incoherent, you know? Like,
No, 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 Mm.
okay, so I understand that this
Mhm.
segment's gonna be harder for you.
Um, it's not gonna be high
We
Q.
were talking about this dumpster fire, and we were
Yeah.
saying how like it's so weird how because we're just coming off of our Haikyuu episode, right? And
Yes.
it's just funny because like when an anime is presenting you everything you want, everything they think you want, like, oh, boys being really seductive,
Mhm.
fawning over girls, and
Mhm.
it's like all of a sudden you don't really want them anymore.
You're just like, "Oh my god, they're cute, like my sons, I love them."
And then when they show you like them doing really wholesome things, like
Mhm.
playing volleyball,
Yeah.
being like best bros with the people on their team, you're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just so, I feel like it really comes down to, like, people want what they can't have, and so when they get just, like, Yeah, it's just so weird. Like, people will go off the rails on their own imagination, but when it's, like, given to you in
Yes.
canon,
It's like,
you're just like,
no
"Oh, okay, that's
thanks.
nice, I guess." I don't know, like
I guess since we're trying to
Yeah.
do this whole thing where we're like guessing each other's favorite
Oh,
characters,
yeah.
do you have any I feel like you know, but like do you have any clue about like who I would die the most for?
Ooh, okay, shoot. I'm gonna guess Tamaki. Okay, good.
Yay!
Because I was for a second, I had some pause because I know that you really like Hikaru,
Mhm.
and that when we were texting at some point while we were watching the show, you were like, "Oh my god, like Hikaru, like you're gonna episode 16, like we love Hikaru." So I had a moment there.
Mhm.
But I would say like Tamaki like is a really great character, and I think it was
Mhm.
so refreshing to see him as the quote unquote male lead, and just for him to not be a douche. Like, I
Mhm.
think the subversion of that trope and just getting to have a male character who's like a nice guy and he's wholesome, and it's that is the kind of standard that you should have for men and
Yeah.
not for,
Yep.
these cold guys that do the bare minimum.
In my
And
notes,
yeah.
it literally says, "Oh, Tamaki plays the piano."
Oh my god, I have something to say about that for a second, because
Okay.
playing the piano is like, I can name a lot of fictional characters that
Yeah.
play the piano, and like suddenly that's
Yeah.
just like the most attractive thing a guy has ever
I
done.
don't
Like,
know why, but I
for
think it
some reason,
is.
it's like guys playing the piano is like immediately like it's literally goes back to that thing where guys can do like the bare minimum, or like they can do something that a girl would also do, but for some reason when a guy does it, it's just like so much better. Anyways, yeah.
I literally have no justification. Like I can't
No, it's fine.
rebuttal.
I'm not no, it's fine. Like, I'm not hating on it. I just think it's funny.
Now we will go on to the ratings.
Yeah. The
Oh
ratings.
my gosh.
I did not think about this. We never think about this, actually.
No,
That's
we
the
don't. We
point.
don't. That's the problem.
That's the point and the problem.
Hmm. I think I'm gonna give it 4.5 out of 5.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
That's the
It's really high, isn't
nostalgia
it?
is so powerful. Can we just talk about how that's the exact same rating that you gave Haikyuu?
It is. And I knew it was gonna be controversial. But I'm judging it 4.5 out of 5 eclairs.
Oh my god.
Eclair
Desserts or desserts or the person?
Desserts.
All right.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the nostalgia playing its role.
That's fine.
And I think that, as a shoujo within its genre, it's just so good. It's a masterpiece of shoujo
Mhm.
for its genre, for the amount of obstacles that it had to overcome as a shoujo as compared to a shonen.
Mhm.
I think it's done such a good job. I think that I myself personally have learned so much lessons from it. And I
Mhm.
think that, as we were discussing in our previous episode, when it does come down to taste,
Yes. Yes.
Ouran loses points for being problematic in a lot of aspects,
Mhm.
but it gains points for having that unique factor in it that Haikyuu just didn't have for me.
Yeah. I'm gonna rate it 2.8
Mm-hmm.
Haruhi's in her uniform. Let me explain.
Okay.
And by her uniform, I mean like the boy's uniform.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll explain the numerical value. I was going to rate it 2.5 because I think that the things that I hated about the show, I hated
Mm-hmm.
in terms of some of the background character writing, the problematic tropes. Like, I just couldn't get around that. And I also don't have the power of nostalgia, unfortunately. But the things that I loved about the show and its focus on family, on friendship, and just how much I loved the character writing of Haruhi and Tamaki, especially, I
Mm-hmm.
really loved. So I was kind of like smack dab in the middle, 2.5. But upon further discussion and upon further reflection, I also think that this show can be viewed more as more self aware and compared to its contemporaries, a little bit better or a lot of it
Right.
better.
Mm-hmm.
I can't justify giving it a full 3 for taste
Mm-hmm.
reasons. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like a romance hater. I love romance and like whatever. It's just it wouldn't be a show that I would pick on my own, but I watched
Yeah.
it and I enjoyed it. But I can't give it a 3 because a 3 is a little still too high for me and my
Right.
shonen wired brain. So a
2.8 is a good rating.
Yeah. And I would say Haruhi in her school uniform just because she looks cute. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for making it this far. We know it wasn't easy.
Is that our new outro?
Yeah, it is.
We know it wasn't
this
easy.
every time. Thank you for making it this far. It wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can put up with us a little bit more, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Workshop and to follow us on Twitter at Into The Workshop.
Mm-hmm. And follow us on Spotify.
And follow us on Spotify
Yeah.
at The Workshop.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's it. Wow.
we will be going back to Shonen next week.
Yes.
We're not going to reveal what we're doing yet, but
No.
I think it's going to be cool. People are going to like it.
Yeah. Gonna be a little bit of
So,
shift.
I'm
It's
glad.
gonna be fun.
All right, cool. That's it for now. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.